One of the things I often skip over in our videos is the dry brushing technique. I do this because it takes quite a lot of time and I thought would look dull on the videos. But a couple of people have asked, can I actually demonstrate this? So firstly, this piece has been prepared in a similar way to our other objects. So a layer of texture paint, sprayed over with a copper spray, and then a dark brown wash over the top. So now the next stage would be to dry brush this. So I'm going to dry brush over the top of this using a water-based acrylic copper paint. Now you have to be careful when doing the dry brushing because you can easily ruin the layers that you've already put onto the object. So what I'll demonstrate first is what happens when this goes wrong. Because once you've dry brushed the object, everything is covered by the dry brush layer. So the biggest mistake is to use too much paint in one go. So I apply paint to my paintbrush and then try and take a lot of it off so that there's only a small amount on the brush. Now in this case I'm going to show you how to do it wrong. So I've actually got too much paint on the brush, so when I gently stroke it across the object, it's leaving a lot of paint behind in one go. Now this means that everything below is covered and cannot be undone. The only way to undo this is to go back to step one and repaint the whole thing. With dry brushing, the best way to do it is to apply a layer after a layer until you're happy with the effect. So to achieve a successful dry brushing effect, what you need to do is take as much of the paint off your brush as you can. I normally do this by painting on a flat surface, such as paper, or in this case a piece of wood, until there's very little paint left on my brush, till there's only small amounts of copper paint coming off. So now when I apply this to the piece, only small amounts of paint will come off at a time. Draw the brush over the high points towards the low points. So you can see gradually a small amount of paint is coming off. This I can gradually build up, so at any point when I have achieved the desired effect, I can stop. So you just keep drawing the brush into the middle. Now you want to do this roughly because you don't want to have streaks of paint where you can see the actual bristle marks. So the rougher you are, and also the rougher the brush, usually the better an effect you can achieve. Almost in some cases dabbing the brush. So you can see at this stage here I could stop and leave it with a very small amount of dry brush paint on, or I can continue to do it to build it up. So the more I do it, the more copper is revealed, but I still get that effect where the wash is hanging around all the high points. So I'm trying to accentuate these high points by focusing upon them to give them the most copper paint, whilst keeping only small amounts going near the low points. So what you're doing here is exaggerating the shape of the piece. So this is what I mean by you can gradually build it up. You don't need to put it on in one go. And this is why I often don't show this stage in our videos, because it takes quite a lot of time. Quite frequently I will start dry brushing an object, put a couple of layers on, and then walk away from it. Because once you've added the next amount of paint, you can't take it away. So you may be happy with it as this is, or you may just want just a bit more. The next thing to do with dry brushing is what do you do when you have a large flat area? Because as I said, this technique will pick out high points. So in the case of this piece, we can pick out the edge very well and we can pick out these lumps, but the center section is quite dark. Now because the center section is raised, I might want that to be quite shiny. So I use the same technique, but try and focus on what I'm trying to achieve. So in this case, what I really want is a sharp, bright rim and a bright center with some dark lines or dark sections around it. The technique is exactly the same. Make sure you get lots of the paint off. You don't want much paint on. And then to start off with, I'm going to focus on the edge. So drawing into the centre around the edge. Logically in my head, an edge will receive the most wear and therefore be the shiniest because it will be polished. Low points will be the darkest because they receive the least wear. So just like in the previous piece, you can see what the dry brushing does is it accentuates the copper around the edge and gives it a shiny look. Excuse me, this is quite difficult to hold. Again, be careful, too much paint and you can spoil the piece. You can sometimes rub it off, but that again can damage the layers beneath. So like the other piece, this has now accentuated the edge. What I now want to do is try and add a shiny section to the middle. So in this case, I'm going to be quite careful. I don't want to stroke the brush across it too much because that will create brush lines. So I'm using more of a dabbing technique than a brushing technique. So you can see already what I'm trying to do here is create a shiny bit in the center, a shiny bit around the edge, and a sort of rim of dark brown wash to give it a bit more of an interesting look. You could just paint the whole thing copper, but then you may as well have done that in the first place rather than doing any of these techniques. It's very difficult to achieve as good an effect in a flat section like this, which is why quite frequently when I'm doing builds I will add things to the object to break up these flat areas, because the technique looks better where you have objects sticking up. And again, stop at any point and decide if that's enough. If your dry brushing technique goes wrong, simplest answer is to respray the piece, do the wash again and then start again. So you're not ruining the object, but it does mean that you have to go back a couple of steps. And when you're happy with the dry brushing, walk away, let it dry and make yourself a cup of tea.